to another episode of Trauma to Triumph. My name is Lynn Lee. I'm the host. Today, we're going to discuss about identity crisis. Our speaker today is Vicki Werner. Hello, Vicki. Thank you for being here.
Hello. I'm super grateful to be a part of this, and I think we have a lot to share. This is going to be a great interview.
Yes. First, can you share with us a little bit about your background?
My own personal history with trauma and how it has sculpted me into being a presenter and a mentor and a life coach is...
Tell us, what is identity crisis?
Well, let's discuss about identity and how we build our identity in the first place. Our identity is going to be cultivated by our environment, and children that are born wherever we're born into a family where our first 8 years as children is all input information. We're not in a conscious state, we're in a subconscious state, and it's all in that theta brainwave state where our life is being prepared to help guide us and what our morals are, what our values are, what our religious beliefs, what our political beliefs, what we think is safe, what we know is unsafe. All of those things are brought into us to prepare us into adulthood. So as we grow up, our identity is our environment. In this environment, we usually will name our identity. If somebody said, well, tell me about yourself, most people will first go to the roles that they have or the career that they have or the people that they're engaged with. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a cook, these skills that we have, or that we identify that as who we are. But when a trauma happens, it could be a small t trauma or a big T trauma. Small t trauma tend to be neglect or shame or a bullying experience. These things that don't necessarily have the category of trauma, but over time cause a significant amount of trauma. When your life fails you, when everything that you think you know is truth no longer exists, then this is how you're going to handle that. Nobody is given those kind of skills. And so we're all left floundering. Now, this could be a divorce. It could be a loss of a child. It could be a loss of a career that you've worked for many years. It could be a friend that betrays you. Any of these levels can cause us to think that our world no longer exists that we thought was true. Eventually, we start looking within. We begin to look at potential of saying, how I feel inside no longer fits this paradigm, and who I am as a different person. And I think anybody who has gone through trauma or is experiencing the residual effects of a trauma, that they start to recognize their body doesn't feel good and their thoughts and emotions are creating this different identity. Now, under trauma, our thoughts and emotions will spiral quite often because we're trying to find closure. We're trying to find the answer as to why. I don't think anybody experiences trauma without eventually saying, why did this happen to me? Why did I have to experience this? Why me and not them? And we start looking at our environment and we measure the person across the street with a better car, or we may measure our coworker who has a great boyfriend, and we're struggling in our own identity. In trauma and in the process of trauma, we often will go through these experiences of feeling victimized. I'll start with the steps of what happens with trauma. Initially, it's a shock to the system of some sort. It's going to be some kind of shock. Now, trauma can be mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, sexual. Any of those categories are going to always end up as an emotional response. It's always going to affect our mental and emotional state. And so our mind will play it over and over and over, and we'll replay it over and over and over because we want closure and we're trying to figure out why. And we feel disempowered and victimized by this. The body and the mind are always in communication. And many people who try to overcome trauma will first try to think positively, and they'll have friends that'll say, or a sibling or somebody in their life will say, just get over it. Just get over it. Just think positive. Just be happy about that. Just know that everything's okay and trust that everything's okay. That's an impossible task, because when you're trying to think positive thoughts or use affirmations or declarations and say that you're bigger and better and stronger and all of these things that are against the way that your body is feeling, that brain is in the conscious mind. And so consciously, we're trying to say those thoughts, and we'll say affirmations and declarations all day long, trying to say that, trying to convince our body that it's okay. However, the body is the unconscious mind. It's in the subconscious. And so when your thoughts are thinking those thoughts, it will never, ever get past the brainstem because we're in our subconscious programs 95% of our days. We have the same behaviors day after day, and it's the subconscious programs. That's where the trauma resides in our body. And so when we could say things over and over in positive thinking, the body says, no, that actually isn't how I feel. No, that's not accurate. And it will cancel each other out. And so positive thinking, positive behavior is fantastic, but it is not the answer to healing trauma.
Yes, I agree. Positive affirmation, positive thinking is the tools that we can utilize to sustain the state that we have overcome. Prior to that, we have to heal the trauma before we can utilize the positive affirmation or positive talking, because they're two different, left and right brain, they're two different things. But first, we have to heal the trauma first, the body, that energy in the body, that's where all the information, the memories are stored. So I totally agree with you about that. What I would like to go back a little bit, you mentioned about identity is how it's cultivated by the environment during the very young age, before the age of 8 years old, right? Trauma can be created during that time, oftentimes. And it could be within your family, for instance, correct? It could be between you, your mom, you, your dad, or your siblings, or how your mom treating you differently, or your brothers or sister differently than you. That can create some trauma as well, right?
Correct.
Or the traditions or the religion you practice also create some trauma as well. Culture construct that you have intake as your identity,
yes.
Correct? And that could be practiced, and then it becomes your subconscious or unconscious, and it's a habit that you use it over and over again. And then over time, you build more of that identity or more of that parts to identify yourself, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
When you go to elementary school, middle school, high school, then you accumulate more data of what you're supposed to identify yourself with. It started from there, and it manifests over and over as you become an adult. Somehow, as you grow through life, you face challenges in life, or something happened that kind of like wipe all those beliefs that you identify yourself as you. And then people label as identity crisis or more challenge where you are in conflict with your body and mind, correct?
Yes, we all go through a metamorphosis. We all have something in our life that shifts. Now, that could be children move out. It could be that a marriage dissolves, be a career change, any of these type of things that shifts who we think we are. Unfortunately, there's many times that our body starts to have a physical response that we didn't even associate or know that it was associated with an unresolved trauma from many years prior. And this breakdown of the body, we may still start having a health crisis, or we might start suffering from emotions, unrest, such as anxiety or depression. And then we start looking at the way that we feel. And now this metamorphosis is starting to reignite a sense that what was working in the past no longer works. And who we were in the past no longer fits the paradigm that we want to be now. And it takes a dissolving of the past. And unfortunately and fortunately, trauma tends to be one of the biggest precursors of this kind of experience. Trauma is an awakening sword. It will force us to look at our lives. It will drop us to our knees and often become the dark night of the soul. And in this dark night of the soul, we no longer associate with who we are with our outer world. And we no longer are using the labels that have been given to us or the labels that we used before to determine individuals that we are. And the first thing that always needs to be looked at is somebody's self-value. Now, historically, especially for women, our value has been on the deeds that we do, the work that we do, how we earn our rights to be in a family, how we earn our rights to be in a relationship, how we strive and be better in grades or be the breadwinner. And men have this experience with the career choices and how they have to climb that corporate ladder. These are all deeds that are outside of us that determine who we are and our value. And none of that matters when we're in a crisis, in a health crisis, an emotional crisis, or a traumatic experience when we're in that healing paradigm. And so then we take our eyes off the outer world and we start looking within. And that's when the magic potential can happen, because we start asking the bigger questions about why are we here? We start asking the bigger questions about what is my purpose? How can I contribute to the whole? How can the world be a better place because I'm in it? How can I make sure that nobody hurts to the level of the pain that I'm feeling? And that becomes one of the the gifts of a traumatic experience. And that's one of the greatest gifts we can have. Now, this comes from a space of understanding. There's man's rules, social rules, write our own rules. It's how we engage in the world. And the first rule that we need to always set up is that our self-value is not based on the deeds that we do. It's not based on the level of our health. It's not based on our socioeconomic status. It's not based on our marriage or level of relationship status. It's not based on our color of our skin or the religion that we have. Our value exists because we exist, and our potential exists because we exist. And so when we look at this and not say that my potential and my value is not only is it not based on the trauma that's happened in me, it's also not based on what I've done in the world. My value exists because I exist. And that's a really great foundation for each person to set, because once we can establish that, then we can start taking the reins on our own healing paradigm. And the next thing that we have to recognize is that if we look at any experience that we had in our life as a neutral, that it's not a good or a bad, that it's neutral, it's just our thoughts and our emotions related to that experience, then we can become empowered again. So we move away from these disempowered thoughts and beliefs of why did this happen to me? This isn't fair. Why am I hurting so bad? Victim angry emotions that are very disempowering. They're very limiting and disempowering. And we start taking the power back and recognize that I have power and control into how I can move forward from this, that I can learn from this experience. I can glean the wisdom from this. We set down the victim. We can set down the identification of who we are as this victim of an experience. And we can recognize, nope, it was just neutral. It may have hurt a lot and it may take me many years to overcome this, but it's not the experience that is going to identify me. It's going to be the way that I handle this experience and grow from this experience and create a better identity and a better version of myself.
I agree with you about your value is your existence. It's not based on your gender, your sex, your religions, right? Or your race. Because as a young age, we are not taught how to deal with all these things. And then when we grow up, when we throw out into society, we face all these discriminations based on these identifying, based on the stereotype, your culture, your whatever, that people are labeling all these things. And then with your childhood identify or values, then you start to create all these stories with them, and to the point where you are lost, confused.
That's absolutely right. When we go through a traumatic experience and unfolding, we really all take a hit of the emotional state and we start to question our value. And especially if it was an act of betrayal or rejection. Now, trauma can be very, very traumatic to have experience a rejection. This can be from an adult child who leaves the family. It can be a relationship. It can even be a job that we thought that we were going to be the role that we were going to have. And rejection is a really, really painful version of trauma. And the reason why those ones are so painful is because our hearts are open and our hearts are giving and loving and being in a relationship or being this role that we created for ourselves. And it's this open heart chakra. It's this open heart energy of us giving and being present in something. And then when the rejection happens or the betrayal happens, that heart is as an open vessel, becomes very, very damaged and vulnerable. And it's why rejection takes such a long time to heal. And it takes a long time to just mend that heart, gentle with that heart. But of course, every person will question their value. Every person will say, why was I not good enough? Why am I not pretty enough, smart enough, rich enough, valuable enough? And we have to just set down the enoughs and just say, I have value because I exist and I love myself enough to heal and do whatever it takes to heal and start to self-nurture again.
I read somewhere it says identity crisis is a struggle between you, who you have become, and the society expects you to be. So you are struggling in between, right? But that your truth is your existence. And how do you declutter all these beliefs that you have accumulated by the cultural construct so that you can create your own identity, or you can create your own life that you feel is true to you?
To shift this identity, take a really good hard look. Where have I been? How did I present myself in the world? Not from a space space of shame, but from a space of saying that we are creators of our life. We're co-creators of the life that we have. How did I contribute to the life that I had before? What was the gift that this trauma gave me? One of the greatest gifts is in compassion, but you can also have a greater sense of wisdom, and then stop telling that disempowering story and start coming from a more empowered story. And the ones that are painful, it's not necessary to share those anymore. It's not valuable to keep bringing those back up. The energy that is valuable at this time is the life that you're creating. Start talking about being in the present moment. Start talking about the things that bring you joy, and change your story around the experience and shift your attention towards what you want to create rather than what's happened in the past.
So the first step is, what were the things that identify you before? It could be trust and somebody broke it, or it could be a career that you've been working for over a long time and something happened that you're no longer able to do. Or what was it? Identify what was that bring you this crisis. It could be you're now in a society where you're not accepted or you're not belong based on your sex or your gender or your race. Could it be like that? Could it be that your identity and no longer exists because it doesn't feel like you belong to anything that you have identified with? You thought you were Vietnamese, but you're not Vietnamese, you're Asian.
That's a really great example. From my perspective with that, it gives us permission to write our own rules again. And we take our association off of the constructs and the labels in this 3D paradigm and just pull ourselves back from a spiritual nature to our soul that identify as love. And so we take those labels off because those labels, they can be hampering or they can be very ego-based. And so just remove the labels and just come from love. Every experience offers a greater opportunity to love more. And so when we're in that healing paradigm, one of the greatest things we can do is say, if I loved myself more, what would I do different right now? Would I be dependent on this other person to fulfill me? Would I need this closure with this other individual? And if you loved yourself more, the answer is no, because that love is self-sustaining. It's your own divine guidance. It's your relationship with your higher self. And when you love yourself more, you're more compassionate to yourself. You're more self-nurturing. You tend to take time to cultivate an inner world, that the world behind your eyes takes way more value than this world and this construct outside of yourself. And you develop this person, this identity that has so much potential of giving and loving and of service. And so when we shift our story and we shift away from needing to identify of what was, and we create a new story of who I am. And then so you write that down. Yeah, you write down, how did I identify before? What was my identity? And then you say, what was my version of that? And then you can say, well, what's my story around what this person, it may be my mother, maybe my daughter, it may be my ex-husband, it may be whatever person you want. What is the story that we tell ourselves that they think about us? And so that we get a well-rounded view. And then you go, is any of that working for me right now? No. Is any of this where I want to go? No. Is any of this making me a better version of myself? No. And so we can say, I actually have permission to change my story. I can give myself permission to change my story. And so you would then say, well, what is the person? What is the role? What is the identity? Who is the person that I want the world to see? And who is the person at the end of my life that I will be grateful for? And one way that you could do that is go in a meditative state and speak with your higher self, or just see yourself at 10 years in the future and meeting with your future self. And what is that one future self? What does she want? What is she grateful that you did? What is she grateful that you embarked on? What is she grateful that you let go of? What is she grateful that you unfolded and brought forward so that she can be who she is here today? And start asking that dialogue and then saying, well, what is my identity? My identity is a soul. My identity is love and service. My identity is compassion. My identity is to give love at a deeper level, always to forgive things that happened in the past, to grow, to evolve. And then say, well, okay, so that's the words around that. But then go, okay, so then what are the emotions that I will feel around that? Again, our mind and our emotions are always in communication. It feels freedom. It feels joy. It feels abundance. It feels light. It feels possibility, excitement, mysticism, expressions of possibilities, all of those things that feel so wonderful. And we've all had moments where we felt bliss. We've all had moments where we felt joy. We can cultivate that. And so we stop going into the old story and start creating this new story. And because our brains are time travelers, that new story can exist today by taking the steps. How does this new identity live? How does this new identity exchange information? How does this new identity interact with people in my life? How does this new identity be the better version of myself? And you walk as if, you live as if, and you wake up in the morning and you say, I'm a better version of myself. And you take your attention off this disempowerment of our past. And the different version of myself is one of joy. It's one of lighthearted. It's forgiveness. It's excitement. It's expression, creativity, and cultivate that emotion and then live it as long as you can throughout that day. And every interaction that you have, every expression that you have, every person that comes into your life, never let the outsider environment determine who you are again. And when you fall from grace, when you have moments where you come back to this old story, you catch yourself and you catch yourself a next time and you catch yourself a next time and you do it a little quicker, a little sooner, and you re-regulate back to the person that you are trying to create. And over time, you build up a new synaptic connection. You unwire those old programs, those old synaptic connections, and you rewire and hardwire a new identity into your brain as if it is. And by nature's design, by the laws of this universe, they have to create themselves.
Journaling or talking to people that can support you so that you can identify them, so that you be more clear on what those are in order to really remove the cultural construct that's not working for you anymore.
I identify as a daughter because I really love my parents. I'm proud to be the daughter of my parents. I identify as a wife and as a mother. I identify as an American, and I identify as a female. Those things work for me. It's not that anything outside of that is wrong or bad, but in my paradigm, that's my identification. So I don't need to change any of those things. I love to travel the world, but I'm happy with the world that I live in right here. So we just only need to identify the ones that no longer fit, maybe from a relationship status or a wound from our history. Those are the ones we're going to look at. So you simply say, this label that was given to me by somebody else. One of my techniques that I use with my clients, if we see a label that was given to us, an identity that somebody else labeled us, we may do a journaling experience, or we may just do a soul experience with that person and talk as if that person, it may be our 10th grade math teacher who said, you're never going to amount to anything. You're not smart enough and you're never going to be successful in life. And so our label that we gave was, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, and I'm not capable of being successful. Well, that 10th grade math teacher is not necessarily in our life today, but that emotion still is present. And so you may do it from a journaling experience or just walking and saying out loud, expressing as if Mr. Jones, we'll say Mr. Jones is right in front of us. And you can say, Mr. Jones, these are the things you said. So I'm identifying, these are what my body heard. This is what's stored in my body. And I'm going to tell you why that doesn't fit for me anymore. And I'm not asking for permission to be a different version. I'm telling you that I'm giving this way, and you are no longer going to be an influencer in my life. I remove you from my table of influence. And then you just do that with the conscious. You can do a breath work and you just wipe that all off. Mr. Jones, you're gone. Thank you. Thank you. I now know where I don't want to be. And some of the greatest gifts is knowing what you don't want, because it helps you get very clear of where you want to be. And then you say, okay, however, my next door neighbor treats me with a lot of respect. And every time I visit with her, she always is inspired by new things that I come up with. And she always wants to hear about how I am creating new things. And she's always impressed about what she sees me create in my yard, and whatever language we want to say. And so you'll say, Mrs. Smith, thank you for showing up in my life and showing me exactly where I want to be. I love that I'm creative. I love that I have potential. I love that I'm actually super smart. And we tell our story around that. We hold our attention on the stories that are real to us. Our truth is going to be, it's subjective based upon whoever is telling their story. But my truth is, I'm intelligent, I'm creative, I can and do succeed. And so anybody who's in our old history, this could be an ex, it could be a bully from school. I will say as a caveat, most people hold trauma from school experience, their peers. Even for me, there's been times where I was about to present on stage, or there's been times where I had a large speaking engagement, or I was meeting with a number of people and somebody from third grade came into my mind. I was thinking they were going to judge me. And I'm like, whoa, I'm giving that person way way too much power. I need to fire that person from my table of influence and remove them from having influence. And I'm going to bring in somebody else. Now, this doesn't even have to be somebody who's living. It can be a great grandmother that's passed over. It can be a person in history. Whoever has traits that you admire, that you want to become more of, let them be your table of influence and create a different identity. You can no longer identify with a disempowering wound and victim energy, and you can always choose to upgrade into a deeper state of love and a deeper state of compassion for self. If the lion is still in the bush, if the threat is still in our experience, if that constant barrage is still happening in our life, we can't heal because we're so engaged with our outer environment. And so meditation is really, really crucial. Start developing a meditative state so that you can become more aware of the thoughts and emotions. Meditation is just meaning it's awareness. It's just a state of awareness. That's a really great tool. EFT tapping, there's a lot of videos online about that. Tapping is a fantastic way to help calm the amygdala down, calm the system down. That's one of my favorite tools. I also love breath work. Dr. Joe Dispenza, Wim Hof, those are two men that have really great breathing techniques. There's a lot of those that are possible too. Breath work pulls emotion and energy out of the body. Again, emotion is stored in the body. And when there's any chronic pain, that's any pain in the body, it's stuck emotions. And so you want to do breath work to help pull that up and out. One of the easiest breath work that we can have if we're having kind of a trauma response is called step breathing, where you go kind of like what we do when we're sobbing, and at the end of that cry where we're releasing, it's just, that's one of those ones. Another one is we can do 6-second inhale, hold, 6-second exhale, hold, 6-second inhale, hold, 6-second exhale, hold. Again, you're calming the system down through breath work and a deep breathing that's from the diaphragm and down from these lower energy centers and pulling it up and moving the body. Another great way to do those. Breath work is really fantastic. I love essential oils. Essential oils, the olfactory senses, the sense of smell goes directly to the brain. The healing oils, essential oils. Now, I'm not talking fragrances. I'm not talking over-the-counter fragrance. No, if you can get a really reputable, high-quality, therapeutic grade, organic, any of those language that is a true essential oil and not a synthetic, which are very hard to come by, but there are companies that are very reputable. Essential oils are really great. Anything that's very grounding, such as cedarwood or vetiver, frankincense, anything that's very soothing for the nervous system, such as rose, neroli, jasmine, anything that's very balancing, calming. And then also citrus oils are very uplifting, can help just change the mood. And you could just do a couple of drops of essential oil in the palm of your hands, rub your hands together, and then just cup over your nose and mouth and just breathe and inhale and just calm the nervous system down. These are all acts of self-love. These are ways that we can engage with the healing experience. My book, The Secret to Healing and Recovery, the purpose of my book was to give people the power to take back their own ability to heal, that we don't have to continue to look outside of ourselves. And the healing will always, always, always take the person doing the work.
Also, you can go out to nature.
Absolutely. Nature is very, very grounding. Absolutely. I love nature. Absolutely. Nutritionally, you want to definitely bring in adaptogenic herbs, and you want to use stuff like bone broth is very soothing to the gut, amino acids. Nutritionally, you want to limit any kind of chemicals, that kind of thing, and just really do self-care. Depending on where you are in the healing matrix, whether it was an immediate trauma, you only have to do 3 things. You have to sleep, you have to eat, and you have to move your body. And the reason why is that's coming back to the nature of self. That's exactly what a baby does. It's when we're in the fetus. It's when we're in this place where those are the survival. Then ease into something. Now, moving the body can be going for a really big power run, but it can be just stretching and yoga. It can be just a gentle walk around the park. And those are the first ones to start with. And then from there, go into creating a support team. And when you create a support team, the caveat that I give that is never, ever share your story with somebody who doesn't deserve to hear it. Because if you're sharing it with somebody that you met at the gym and then you're like, oh my gosh, I was raped like 12 years ago, and you start going into this whole story, first of all, they're like, whoa, that was a a lot. I'm not prepared for that. And second of all, you have no control over what happens to that story after that. And so you can open up Pandora's box. So then you'll leave the gym and you're like, why did I say that? Oh, I feel so dumb. And then you just go into the shame storm. Develop a really great social thing. In fact, just the other day, I had a really painful experience, something that came up again that I thought I had resolved to some degree, and it triggered me. And I just send a text to my friend and say, hey, I just need you to hold my heart for a minute. Call me when you're available. And we talked it out. I shared what's happening. She says, I'm sorry. I'm here for you. And that's all I needed. We know each other. We trust each other. There's a love there. Ultimately, we all just want to be heard. We all want to be validated for the way that we feel. It's really important to recognize that when we're sharing our story, when we're telling our story, create some relationship around that with people in your life, in our family, or with my friends. When somebody starts sharing something, one of the things we can say is, hey, are we problem solving here? Are you wanting solutions here? Or do you just need us just to be a presence for you? That's a great thing to look at, because first of all, when you're sharing your story, you're like, wow, I don't know what I actually want with that. And you start thinking about that. And sometimes you could come to the table and go, okay, I need some problem solving. This keeps coming up and I'm hurting every single time this trigger happens. What do I do? What suggestions do you have? How can I love myself more with this kind of thing? Problem solving is great. And then other times like thinking, this really sucked and I'm really still angry about this and I just need somebody to care for a minute. Both of those can happen and both of those are okay. But choose how long you're going to tell that story and choose how long you're going to reside in that emotional state. And then again, as that level of free agency as a soul who is an individual has a right to say, now I'm ready to tell a new story. And the new story is going to be far better, far more joyful, far more possibilities. And I'm going to love myself more because I'm telling a better story.
That's great. The things that people say to us or things that we experience in our life that create this crisis. But we have to find the ground where you can fall back for yourself. Once you identify things that are not serving you, then you move into the joy. So that is your ground. You hold that ground. When you find yourself falling back to the old stories, you can go back to your ground and sit there and reflect on all those. Like a safe place to go. That's what you need to create from now on. And this requires some work for you to do. Some dive deep into your subconscious mind. When you're falling off, you can always go back to the ground so you can sort out what you need to do to move you toward joy, fulfillment, or your true being or your true living. What would that be? Like anything that you do, does it align with your joy, your true, your well-being?
That's right. And every single moment you move from opportunity to say, I loved myself more. How would I do differently in this moment? And you keep asking that question because every opportunity is an opportunity to love ourselves more. And if we keep coming back to that, those old stories, they don't work anymore and they don't have the emotional charge anymore because the person that we're becoming is far more exciting and far more joyful. And we like that person better. And we can be compassionate with this old self. In fact, in my old experiences, when I've shared about it, when I've even reflected about it, I have a lot of compassion for the woman that I was. I have a lot of compassion for the obstacles that were presented for us. I have a lot of compassion to the years of trauma and the experiences led us to today. There was some really dark, painful days, really hard to get through, and where you feel so isolated and so alone, and you wonder if you're ever going to change. And pain always will permeate through every aspect of our life. It always will help decide the decisions that we make. It will always limit our possibilities for sure. But there is an unfolding and there is a process of becoming a better version of ourselves. And it doesn't mean this past version was wrong or bad. It's so important to keep bringing that back up. But it does mean that who we came to be had an opportunity to grow through this challenge and this experience. Growth doesn't happen in the happy, sweet laying in the flowers. That's not when growth happens. That's regeneration. That's when we have recalibration. That's where we get the parasympathetic system back online. That's where we digest and then we can get creative and all of those things. Those happen in those moments, in the moments where there's just ease in the home, when there's moments when our life is going well. With just those are the times that then you think, wow, I can get really fun with this. I can see how far I can go with this. But in the times when we're in this sympathetic response and then we have this resistance and these challenges that keep presenting themselves and we feel like the cross that we carry is so heavy, then those are the times where we start going within, we start giving ourselves permission to love ourselves deeper. We start to go, okay, what isn't working? What do I need to let go in order to this new life come into my existence and into my paradigm here? And then just love yourself very gently gently through this. Brute force is not the answer any more than that positive thinking. Please know positive thinking is fantastic, but it's not the only tool to use. When we use brute force and we force ourselves, I'm going to be happy, and we force ourselves, I'm going to have a better life, and I'm going to make more money, and this person doesn't matter because I'm going to have a more attractive relationship. Whatever story we try to create around it, we're in resistance. We're in that level of limitation, and we're only able to create at a level of our emotional state because it's super crucial. We are only able to create and see and perceive at the level of what our emotional state is. And so if that crisis is, say, for instance, a cancer diagnosis, and the doctor comes in and tells you all of your lab work, and now that this is your prognosis and this is your life expectancy and all of that stuff, we shut down all possibilities because we've dropped our energy down in fear. We've shrunk our energy into constriction and limitation, and we are only able to see in one very limited perspective. But when we do the tapping and meditation and we will have walks in nature, we laugh and spend time with loved ones, we lift ourselves up. When we turn on music that makes us dance, feel joy and possibilities, and then we drop into this quiet space, we think, wow, there's actually a lot of possibilities. I actually have a lot of potential. I have free agency, and I could create an identity that means way more to me than this old story used to.
That's great. So find work that uplifts your inner beings.
That's right.
When you're facing your identity challenges, so that can shift the energy. It's all about inner work, that creating that energy that align your mind body. Would you like to add anything else?
On a final note, just be compassionate with yourself. Know that we're all on this journey of unfolding. We all have a potential to continue to learn, to express, and to love. When you see somebody who's struggling, don't trivialize where they're at. Everybody's been there. We've all had times when we've dropped down into the hole, but we've also had times where we can lift each other's up. We have been in a world with endless information. You could Google search anything you want to know and have endless information, but now we need to say, how does this information apply to me? There's so many healing modalities out there. There's so many healing techniques. There's great practitioners. There's great support tools. Be empowered and take the power back in yourself and start doing the work. When we find information and we find a technique that works for you, do it and stay with it and have faith in yourself. And when you fall from grace for that moment, when you just feel fragile, drop to your knees. That's when you go back into prayer. That's when you go back into self-love and nurturing. Be gentle with yourself and know that tomorrow's going to be a better day. And then just keep creating that better identity for self.
So how can people find you?
Well, my website is VickiWerner.com. I have a fantastic offer with that on my website through this program, I have another training that goes into the depth about trauma and how we respond to different levels of trauma. And then I go into great more lengths about techniques and support tools to help an individual be more empowered. So that's available through this. My book, The Secret to Healing and Recovery, is also available on my website or through Amazon.
Thank you so much, Vicki, for sharing your expertise. This is so great. So you guys, please have your mind open. Get to know your heart. Heal your heart if you have to, so that you can get to know yourself better, so you can reach your higher self. So it's all about internal work. Get to know your heart. All right. Thank you for joining. I'll see you guys next time.